Everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. It's a big day, Sher.
It is.
We have just been having the conversation before the conversation about this episode being really a celebration episode because this is our 100th podcast episode. 100 conversations around trauma.
Well, and these 100 are a drop in the bucket, right, Candace?
Oh my gosh, yes.
But yes, 100 episodes. We're really pausing to celebrate, to notice, to reflect, to dream, and but to just stay in this moment for a moment, to pause and say, yes, worthy of celebrating this good work that we have done in bringing these podcast episodes to anyone who wants to listen.
Yes. If you're watching, because we are on YouTube, we know a lot of people just listen on their favorite podcast app. There's a lot of things that, I'm thinking over these last 100 episodes. We have never done anything like this before.
No.
Like figuring out mic stuff. And thankfully, we found a producer right from the beginning that just does all the things that we don't do, we don't want to do, and we can't do.
Yeah. And we are so grateful for Jeremiah and Story and for his work on our behalf. Yeah.
Very grateful for that. You said something as we were talking this morning about this isn't so much a focus on all that we do, but you called it a marking, and that really caught my attention. Like, what are we marking with this 100th episode?
I think we're marking, and we really didn't discuss this, so I'm going to just ponder a little bit as we talk about this. But I think it's marking the significance of, like you said, we had never done anything like this before. We felt called, in a sense, to do it, to put our voices out into the world, which, both of us have some trauma around that. And yet we felt called to step forward and put the microphone in front of us every week and turn the record button on and talk about the topics that have made and continue to make a huge impact in our processing of childhood trauma. Like we are marking the goodness of, we have carried the baton forward. We made the choice, and we have just continued week after week after week, and we honestly have no ending date in mind.
Yeah, we'll probably be talking this topic. Who knows? Maybe we'll be in our 90s. I don't know, but
yeah.
I want to say that coming up in this episode, we have asked a few people to just let us know, like, what has been impactful to them about our podcast. We have never focused our energy on marketing and advertising, or spending a lot of time or effort in getting our podcast out there. And yet we have seen a consistency and a growth, and we do get feedback at times. And so we wanted some of our listeners to just hear how this podcast has influenced people.
I've been listening to the Processing Trauma podcast since the beginning, and I'm so grateful for Sher and Kandace's support. To know that there's a community out there for complex childhood trauma and complex PTSD is such a wonderful thing. I want more people to know about it. The advice that they offer and the experience that they offer to just helping people in a safe space from the comfort of your own home, watching YouTube or listening to the podcast. It's just been so amazing.
Because I didn't really experience major childhood trauma, I didn't think I had things to gain from a podcast on trauma. But I've been helped and challenged much through Kandace and Sher's vulnerably sharing and teaching on many important topics. One that was helpful to me is the different attachment styles and how that affects our relationships. And also on deep listening, the importance of receiving deep listening and then giving that to others really challenged me.
What I love about processing trauma out loud is the kindness and hope I feel as I listen to Kandace and Sher. Their conversations are real as they share their own personal experiences and struggles in doing the hard work of healing. A quote from Sher that really landed with me is that deep listening could change the world. I love that. It's evident that Kandace and Sher listen deeply and with curiosity, and it has encouraged me as a listener to do the same. I have so much gratitude for these two women and this podcast and the healing it is bringing in my own journey.
I love the courage and bravery of Kandace and Sher, and that they show up in their podcast with vulnerability, with the purpose of leading others to healing like they themselves have received. Some of my favorite episodes were the ones on victim mentality. The way they spoke of it as being a reasonable and obvious coping mechanism in response to complex trauma helped me see my own victim mentality that I had not seen before. My beliefs of hopelessness and expected defeats was simply my only reality. I did not see it as a mentality that was holding me back from what was actually true, from seeing my strength and capability of choosing a different way of perceiving the path in front of me and doing something different. It helped me see that there is something better available to me, that I truly am capable of being strong, and defeat is not the expected for me. Thank you, Kandace and Sher, for your good work.
While going through one of the hardest seasons of my life, processing trauma out loud has helped me in so many ways. Their topics are so insightful, and sometimes you look at the titles and you're like, I don't know that I really need this one or that it'll apply to my life. But then as you start listening and they start sharing things, you're like, wow, this does change my life. I also love how Sher and Kandace interact with each other, and to see the curiosity that they hold for each other's stories and what they say has helped me not only slow down and be curious with other people, but also with myself.
Sher, you and Kandace have given so much valuable detail about trauma. I'll mention just a few ideas. Identifying the pain of it and the grieving, feelings of victimhood, our inner critic, deep listening, self-awareness and betrayal, the need for compassion, the issue of shame, attunement, story works. I mean, the list goes on and on. You've brought so much awareness to trauma, and with the caring, thoughtful way you present it, one feels happy to listen along and be part of this soothing environment and purposeful conversation. Thank you. I mean a deep felt thanks to both of you for sharing yourselves so freely and with great insight, wanting to touch others in consequential ways. I certainly have learned and grown much from your podcast. God is using you! ! Congratulations on your 100th podcast.
I want to also just pause for a second and talk about why we are celebrating, and just the reality of what, because I feel like this is important not only for why we're celebrating the podcast, but why do we pause to celebrate when we see growth or change in our lives? When we pause and notice and celebrate, like, it literally changes the chemistry in our body. Our oxytocin and dopamine go up, our cortisol levels go down, and just that process of pausing to celebrate matters to our body. And I'm pointing this out not just because we're celebrating our 100th episode, but because I think it's very easy to quickly pass over the moments when we recognize goodness that has come into our lives, or change, or growth, or where we see ourselves showing up in a way today that we wouldn't have a month ago or a year ago. And do we stop and pause and take a deep breath and say, like, wow, I want to celebrate this moment because this feels, you used the word this morning with me in some areas where I'm making some changes, like it's rebellious against the plots and schemes that have been established against us. You spoke
Mhm.
those words this morning, and it really just jumped off the page at me. Like when we celebrate our
Mhm.
growth, um, goodness that has come, or accomplishments like 100 episodes, like it is rebellion against the plots and schemes that tried very hard to take us out and silence our voices and make us small. And here we are showing up saying, here we are, and we're going to keep putting our voice out into the world.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And when we've had developmental childhood trauma, we live with a sense, I've heard many people say it this way, that there's an anxiety in celebration or in taking that moment to feel the victory within our bodies, because there is a sense
Mm.
of um another shoe's going to drop.
Yeah.
Like we can't allow our bodies to soak in and receive the goodness, the joy, the celebration, because we have another part that's fearful that it's going to be taken away.
Yeah.
Because you and I both know in our own stories and many, many stories that we've heard, those plots and schemes that come into our lives at a very young age oftentimes come at a moment that we are experiencing as a child a sense of aliveness and goodness.
Mhm.
And so there's an intersection happens. So we have this evil thing that happens at the moment that we are experiencing something good. Not always, but many times that is the plot, right? I don't ever want you to think that real good, lasting joy and goodness and freedom could ever come for you.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I will say, I had that belief.
Oh, me too. And as I have written several of my stories, I have come to that realization that it was in my moments of joy or my moments of, um, experiencing such goodness and feeling a sense of life is good and the world is good and I feel loved. And then the shattering of that, like just a full force attempt to absolutely shatter me in that process. And that shattering brings terror, and we don't ever want to feel that again. And so we hold the good moments at bay. We don't step into them and really experience the goodness or the love or the joy. And instead, we wear the coat of armor that keeps us from vitality and vibrancy in our lives.
Yeah. Well, we think that we're avoiding risk,
Yeah.
right? And, there is always going to be risk in life, and
Yep.
to some degree. Some of us are riskier than others, but
Yeah.
there is risk. And here's the difference between the risk that we face today. So, as a child, when we were allowing ourselves to be a
Mm.
child and experience goodness, the harm that came to us with no repair and no resources in the moment to make any sense or meaning out of what happened.
Right.
And so that's the part that feels fatal. Like, I can't figure this out. And when there's a lot of developmental trauma and parentification and triangulation, a lot of that is, well, what's happening is I'm the bad one. I'm making all this happen. I'm the reason people can't get along. And so as an adult, we still have the risk, right? I mean, you and I both know that we could have something today that would be very painful. But now we have the resources.
Yeah.
We know that we know that we know that we are not alone. We won't be alone.
Mm.
Doesn't mean that it wouldn't be hard. It's very different for a child. So part of the healing journey and the celebration of today is we want to take good risks.
Mm.
And this podcast was me and you taking a good risk.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking as you're talking about how when we are on this journey of processing our trauma and desiring with greater and greater levels of desiring healing and wholeness and love and goodness and freedom. Like as we open ourselves toward desiring that, like it's like we begin to climb Mount Everest. We are going to experience hard stuff along the way. I mean, we have to peel back the layers of our stories of trauma that we have worked hard to cover up and not look at all of our lives just in order to survive. So, like, it's like climbing Mount Everest is not easy. I would never do it. Like, there's nothing about that. That feels even remotely fun to me. Like, it's freezing cold and you can't breathe because the oxygen is thin and like people die there, but in a much, for me, I will say a smaller scale, this journey of moving toward healing is like climbing Mount Everest. And some aspects of that journey we have to do alone. And some aspects of that journey we absolutely cannot do alone. We can't. We were wounded in community, and it requires community for us to heal. And that is part of the reason why we are doing this podcast. It is a way that we can walk some miles of this very difficult journey with our listeners. Like, are we what we bring on the podcast? Is it enough? I would say no. I'm a huge believer in like, you're probably going to need somebody to sit down with you one-to-one, look into your eyes as you tell your stories and help you reframe and reorient yourself to what is really the truth, not what you've always believed the truth to be. But is this podcast and the messages that we offer, is it a part of that journey up Mount Everest? And I will say, I know it is because of the feedback that we've gotten. We know that it is. And that is what gives me a lot of joy for showing up here week after week, 100 times so far. And actually more than 100 because we've scratched a few.
Out of wisdom.
Yeah, but showing up and bringing the message that at least the things that have been and continue to be really significant for us on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought up desire. And yeah, we had a little bit of a conversation about my trajectory of when I started story work almost 4 or 5 years ago, 2019, and how there was in one of my first story groups, there was I'll just share this because we want to invite our listeners to think about a story group someday.
Yeah.
There is something, so working one-on-one is usually how we all start. But then you have the capacity to kind of be with others, not only as a listener and an attuner for their story, but also you have gifts too to bring into that. And then you can receive those gifts. But so at the end of usually these type of story groups, we bless one another. We bless one another with something that we've gotten to see about them, know about them. it is, of course, it's my favorite thing at the end. And we're getting ready to do that with 10 women that we've been in a story group with.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that. So anyway, this lady, it was actually the facilitator, moved forward, and she said, "Kandace, you are such a desirous woman." And I mean, immediately I go back, I resist, and I have something in me that says, "Don't call me a desirous woman."
Yeah. Mm.
So here's what I want to say: I am such a good, desirous woman. And Cher, just tell me I'm a desirous woman every
Oh,
day.
yeah. Yes. Yes, you
Yeah.
are. And your desire is beautiful. And what your desires are moving toward and drawing to you is goodness and kindness and truth and love and all of the things that we were made to experience and long for and partake of, but
Yeah.
what we have been separated for a while to the point where we even tried to kill our ability to have desire. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like if we had a trajectory of story work, right? And healing, it would be what died in you? What was cursed in you? What can you not bear to look at?
Mm.
Because there's some sort of self-accusation, other accusation. And if we can get gently and slowly into those places, and then we there's a rumbling, like I'm just seeing this like little bit of a rumbling. It's like this seed that starts to move and rumble and have shoots. And then, oh, wow, I'm getting emotional about this. This is
Mm.
our story share.
Yeah.
We have these shoots coming up because we've tapped into our deep good desires.
Yeah.
And we want everybody to do that, have that.
Yeah.
Especially those, real quickly, especially those who somehow received a message that your desire is bad and dangerous.
Hmm. Yeah. Mm. So good and beautiful, I will say. The reclaiming of these areas that were taken away from us,
Mm.
being able to move into them with joy and, yep, with a little bit of fear and trembling. And
Mhm.
then, and I'll come back to about what you said about being in a story group. Having these aspects of our lives exposed to beautiful, wonderful light and love, and having others name them in ways that take away and heal the sting and the wounds that have kept us in hiding and pretending and performing for probably most of our lives.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, we are, we are, our listeners know this if they're regular. We have a unending story group.
Yeah.
So we do story groups that we have a start date and a finish date, and they're good and wonderful. But we have found an unending story group. We've said this before amongst ourselves as our Pearls group. Um, I'm just doing a little imagining there. I actually want that for every woman.
Yeah.
I do for every woman that would maybe be able to name, I feel very alone. Like I feel misunderstood. I feel disconnected. I feel cast out. I feel shunned. Like just maybe pause for a minute and like what is the truth of that desire in you that maybe you killed off because it was too painful
Mm.
to consider how do I desire something that I don't know how to go after?
Mm.
Yeah.
And something that has brought such hurt. And I mean, that's the reality. A lot of us have been deeply hurt in groups. I think, particularly women, because we move a little bit close, and then so often there's betrayal or there's rejection. And I've heard so many women say, I will never do another women's group, or I will never talk about these things, or whatever. And I want to just, maybe as we close today, I want to call our listeners to take a look at what it is that maybe is preventing you from taking steps toward beginning to climb your Mount Everest. And that might be working one to one with a story coach or a trauma informed therapist. It might be moving toward entering a story group where you would have a small group of people that would surround you. Like, can we find the courage to take the first step? Is there commitment required? Yes. Is there investment required? Yes. Is it scary and hard and all the things that would keep us from doing it? Yep. You and I both would say, like, it is worth any cost that is required. Like, whatever
Yeah.
stands in your way, get those things out of the way and go toward the desires that are still alive in you, the desire to not be alone, the desire to feel like you have connections with people, the desire to feel loved and seen and heard and known. Like, these are so worthy and so important.
Yeah. And I want to say age, don't think that it's too late. Don't think that it's too early.
Yeah.
You could be in your 20s, 30s, you could be in your 70s, 80s. Like there just really is no expiration date on the fact that you are so worthy of good care and someone being with you, maybe in things that you never thought you would tell. You know this, but my dad shared some stories with me on his deathbed, literally weeks before he died. And I wept with him and I held him. And you know what? Even in that moment, he had a peace that he wouldn't have had,
Yeah.
even in the last few weeks of his life. So I'm just going to say, I know it's never too late.
Yeah. So true, Candace. So true. So we celebrate 100 episodes and 100 episodes with each other and with a whole host of listeners that we haven't even had the privilege of meeting, but we have the privilege of walking this journey together, and that is meaningful.
I'm celebrating in my heart. We are going to get together and have a celebration together at some point.
Yep.
But yeah, I just feel so much gratitude that not only have we heard from our listeners share, but you and I both know what this has meant for us as friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A world.
Yeah. Love you, friend.
I love you too.